I didn't think it was possible to have even less faith in Ubisoft than before, but here we are with the latest developments. Back in October of 2024, there were definitely aspects showing that Ubisoft was in serious trouble, namely the consideration of a potential buyout of Ubisoft. Now, ultimately, that didn't end up panning out. Instead, what Ubisoft decided to do, as reported here on March 14th, 2025 by Bloomberg, was to seek backers to create the subsidiary that would house some of their most famous IPs, basically like a shell corporation or something like that, just a sub-organization for their top IPs. And then on March 27th, 2025, they made it official. They said right here that Ubisoft accelerates its transformation by laying foundation for a new operating model with the creation of a subsidiary and injection of 1.16 billion euros of cash from selected investor Tencent. And through that, what we learned was that they're going to carve out a subsidiary that would be all about Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six. Except I don't know how just shifting some things around will ultimately help what the core issue is, which is leadership and the kind of lack of creativity or a lack of boundary pushing experiences and products on the part of Ubisoft, who are sticking to formulas that they know and that they know are safe, and are sticking to a lot of trend chasing. And those are the aspects that really need to be fixed. Creating a subsidiary that ultimately changes nothing. I don't know how that was ultimately going to help Ubisoft. Now, with the most recent developments, Ubisoft has found itself in a situation where faith on the company is so low, even on the part of investors, that Ubisoft's stock price is at less than $1 per share, 95 cents per share. I don't know that we've ever seen Ubisoft stock dip this low. The lowest I see in this Google chart right here is back in like 2012 when it approached, $1. But yeah, suffice to say that Ubisoft stock price is some of the lowest, if not the lowest we have ever seen in company's history. And it all has to do with Ubisoft's recent announcement detailing how they plan to transform the company. And all of this is detailed right here by Video Games Chronicle. And as part of this transformation, one of the things that Ubisoft felt obligated to do was cancel a bunch of projects, delay a bunch of others, and close down some studios. Or as Video Game Chronicles puts it right here, 6 games canned, 7 delayed, and 2 studios closed. This was confirmed directly by Ubisoft. And for years now, this has just been such a common trend for Ubisoft. So even back in 2023, we saw Ubisoft cancel 3 unannounced games, delay Skull and Bones. We saw games like Frontiers of Pandora, the Avatar game, get delayed during its marketing campaign. We saw Ubisoft delay Assassin's Creed Shadows at one point as the stakes surrounding this game grew higher, with Ubisoft becoming so dependent on this game's financial performance to define its future. Like, it's ridiculous how commonplace this kind of thing is becoming for Ubisoft. And that brings us to today. 6 canceled games, it reads right here, did not meet Ubisoft's new enhanced quality expectations, whatever the hell that means, it said, including the much-delayed Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake, a mobile title, and 4 other unannounced games, including 3 original IPs. That's right, folks. Prince of Persia remake is officially canceled. In fact, on Twitter, you'll find that the Prince of Persia Twitter page posted the following statement: to the Prince of Persia community, we want to share with you directly. We have made the difficult decision to stop development on Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake. We know this is deeply disappointing. The game carries enormous meaning for fans and for the teams who worked on it. While the project had real potential, we weren't able to reach the level of quality you deserve, and continuing would have required more time and investment than we could responsibly commit, and we didn't want to release something that fell short of what the Sands of Time represents. Prince of Persia as a universe and a legacy continues to matter deeply to us, and this decision does not mean we're stepping away from the franchise. Thank you for your passion, patience, and love for Prince of Persia, the Prince of Persia team. Yeah, that really sucks, but at the same time, from what we've seen of the Prince of Persia remake, it wasn't necessarily looking good. Like, you may recall that the announcement trailer for this came out back in, September 10th, 2020, over 5 years ago. And it looked like this. It just didn't look great. And the backlash was so severe against it that they decided to delay the game. Believe it or not, the original release window for this game was January of 2021. The game had been in development for 2.5 years by Ubisoft's Indian studios before they had to change plans on that front. But with concerns surrounding its quality looming eventually in 2023, it was announced that Ubisoft Montreal, the original developers of 2003's Sands of Time, it was decided that they would take over development, but even they couldn't salvage what was there, and Ubisoft felt the need to cancel it. Prince of Persia Sands of Time is a really special game, and people would have loved to see a remake done properly, and were anticipating this game when they announced a delay that would hopefully mark a significantly improved showcase of the game. But at the same time, maybe it was for the best that this got canceled, given that early signs showed that this game was in for rough tidings. I think it's better that than to sully the memory of the original game. But still, it sucks that it all played out the way it did, and that Ubisoft ultimately mismanaged a remake of Prince of Persia Sands of Time, which I think a lot of people would have really enjoyed in this modern day and age. That's on top of canceling 3 original IPs that were set to be created, which highlights that Ubisoft is less prone to taking risks due to the precarious status of the company, which at the same time might be the very thing that ends up killing them, the lack of risk and innovation. So it's almost like a snake eating its own tail kind of a situation. As for which 7 games were delayed, that's something that Ubisoft didn't go into detail, but one of the speculated games that were delayed is the remake of Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Tom Henderson from Insider Gaming reports as much here, saying that Black Flag remake likely delayed by up to 1 year. This is a game that was set to come out this year in just a few months, and with confirmation that one of the titles was planned for release before April of 2026 and will now be released before April of 2027, it all just seems to align, where it seems to suggest that, based on information we know, Assassin's Creed Black Flag was among the titles delayed, not canceled, but still pushed back pretty significantly for essentially polish and quality assurance. And, not to say that game delays are a bad thing if it ultimately means we get a better product, but the fact that this has been such a consistent pattern for Ubisoft, the constant cancellation of games, the constant delay of games, and when games do eventually come out, not ultimately meeting the critical and commercial reception that they expected, all that culminates in what feels like a woefully mismanaged game publisher. As for studio closures and layoffs, we do know that the 2 studios that were closed were Halifax and Stockholm, and that in terms of layoffs, they haven't specified an exact number, but among the studios that were shut down, there will be people who, some will be reshuffled into the company and others will be let go. And that finally brings us to this new corporate structure that Ubisoft came up with to try to salvage their creative output and to try to make their company more efficient and whatnot. And it's all described in this screenshot right here, where now their creative teams are going to be divided into creative houses. So the first creative house is just Vantage Studios, and then you've got Creative House 2, 3, 4, and 5. And all of them are going to be supervised by Ubisoft HQ and supported by this creative network, a network of studios partnering with all creative houses to provide best-in-class production capacity, as well as partnering with Core Services, a separate team that will provide shared, standardized, and scalable services that enable the brand and projects teams to focus on their core missions. And the different creative houses will each individually have their own leadership, and each one will essentially be designated a genre, with the exception of Vantage Studios, the first creative house, which will primarily focus on Ubisoft's biggest IPs, Rainbow Six, Assassin's Creed, and Far Cry. And then we have Creative House 2, which will be dedicated to competitive and cooperative shooter experiences, including The Division, Ghost Recon, and Splinter Cell. Creative House 3 will operate a roster of select, sharp, live experiences such as For Honor, The Crew, Riders Republic, Brawlhalla, and Skull and Bones. Then we have Creative House 4, which will focus on fantasy worlds and narrative-driven universes like Anno, Might and Magic, Rayman, Prince of Persia, and Beyond Good and Evil. And yes, apparently Beyond Good and Evil 2 is still in development. Somehow, I don't know how, like Prince of Persia remake gets canceled before Beyond Good and Evil 2, given that that's a game that's been in development for 17 years now. That's more development time than frickin' Duke Nukem Forever at this point. And finally, you have Creative House 5, which Ubisoft says is aimed at reclaiming our position in casual and family-friendly games in brands including Just Dance, Uno, and Hasbro. And the way it works is that each creative house is its own sector, and essentially specific development studios that fit the genre and criteria of certain creative houses will be essentially assigned to that creative house, while some will be assigned to the creative network team and work with multiple houses. So the idea is to create these layers of hierarchy that will allow all studios to kind of, I guess, try to coordinate better with things like the creative network, allowing all of these creative houses to consult a select team that will aid them in their endeavors, so on and so forth. As highlighted right here by Video Games Chronicle, each of the creative houses will have its own leadership and end-to-end responsibility for its portfolio, from development to publishing and financial accountability, which Ubisoft hopes will help it make better, faster decisions, and lead to more hit games. The creative houses will be supported by a creative network team, which will share studio expertise and provide co-development support, as well as a core services group, which will focus on technology, QA, localization, business planning, and more. Now, whether this restructuring will have any tangible impact on Ubisoft's ability to create games more efficiently and to make them better remains to be seen, but what does not inspire confidence is this statement from Yves Guillemot himself, the CEO of Ubisoft, when he talked about this restructuring and this revitalization of Ubisoft, and along the way said this: "We are transforming Ubisoft's operating model to produce exceptional quality games on the two core pillars of our strategy, which are open world adventures and games as a service native experiences." To me, that doesn't sound like Ubisoft is bolstering the developer's creative environment, but rather that they're doubling down on the things that are killing them, which is just a lack of innovation in the open world format that Ubisoft just seems so enamored with that they kind of recycle that formula without making significant steps forward on that front or significant refreshing like evolutions that allow this genre to feel fresh, and the games as a service stuff that has tanked them. Like, yes, Rainbow Six Siege was a big success for them, but that's the exception, not the norm. The other live services that Ubisoft has tried to output have all but failed. Whether we're talking about that cyberpunky battle royale game Hyperspace, whether we're talking about Skull and Bones, or whether we're talking about their attempt at a Call of Duty-like in the form of X-Defiant, which also flopped and they had to shut it down. In my opinion, Ubisoft's core issues have nothing to do with the corporate structure, though I'm sure there are aspects of that that do impede aspects of development, and maybe some restructuring will help with efficiency and whatnot. But when it comes to like their game's ability to sell and to be mega hits, like aside from established franchises like Assassin's Creed, the reason why all of them fail is because it just feels like Ubisoft is so far behind when compared to the competition in the genres that Ubisoft tackles. The other development studios are just pushing more boundaries, are essentially just like setting new bars that Ubisoft just isn't, because they've gotten so like stagnant in the way they develop games, because the creative aspect of Ubisoft feels so much more stifled. So at the end of the day, what helps a game company is when people buy their games. And if you can't like earn their interest by showing something genuinely compelling, instead of playing it safe and using either the same trend chasing formulas or using the formulas that have worked for you in the past, but you somehow can't evolve past them and keep trying to like factory churn out similar type games instead of pushing the boundaries of the genres that you help popularize, then yeah, you're going to fall behind and you're going to be supplanted by companies that do try to push for developers having creative autonomy that allows them to take a genre and make it fresh again. And yeah, there's plenty of commentary out there about Ubisoft's recent like transformation, as well as their commitment to things that have ultimately been the things that have made them fail. So for example, like Legendary Drops right here highlighted how Ubisoft's plan to fix everything is literally just doubling down on the same thing that made them fail. Brilliant, simply brilliant. That is kind of what it feels like. Others are highlighting just some of the baffling decisions that we've seen Ubisoft make in recent months and years. So Nick Tech, for example, says, so far Ubisoft has canceled Prince of Persia Remake, canceled Assassin's Creed post-Civil War game, which sounded kind of cool, delayed most likely Assassin's Creed 4 Resynced, and 6 other games, effectively put Watch Dogs franchise on hold or dead and buried. With the last Watch Dogs game, while there was some cool mechanical aspects, once again, that tried and tired Ubisoft formula that they haven't been able to evolve enough to make that genre feel fresh from Ubisoft, I think also killed the Watch Dogs series. Canceled the Splinter Cell game that was in development. Canceled Star Wars Outlaws 2 before it entered full production. What's going on at Ubisoft? Well, I mean, cancellations happen when a company deems that a project, like continuing its development and spending more money on it, is just not worth the risk of its failure when they feel like the project will end up ultimately costing them more than it will make them money. But all this just feels so self-inflicted by Ubisoft because they're so like risk adverse, or because they're just not pushing boundaries enough with their creative output. And instead of blaming it on just the lack of pushing boundaries, what they blame it on is that, oh, people are not interested in these kinds of games anymore, when that is plain and simply false. When other developers do it, and they do formulas that Ubisoft has helped popularize, but they do it better and they find ways to evolve that formula and advance the genre, that's when people are like, ooh, this feels like a game that I would spend dozens of hours on and not get bored. There's plenty of interest surrounding types of games that Ubisoft is canceling within their own studio. If you look at the sales out there of games that have tackled similar genres, it's just, again, a situation of like Ubisoft being a snake that's eating its own tail. Like, people will show up if your game is boundary pushing, and Ubisoft just hasn't been able to do that for far too many years. And the Ubisoft logo, in turn, has become not that interesting to look at. And, it's not a logo that inspires hype anymore. And that's what Ubisoft needs to get back. All this restructuring won't matter if they don't get that back. The hype that people experience when they see a certain company's name show up in a trailer, you know what I mean? And that starts with letting developers cook and expanding the level of creativity that you allow, and taking some risks. But, with Ubisoft being in the position that they're in right now, they feel the need to play it safer, because risk right now could sink this company due to how financially precarious things are, due to the constant failures that resulted from leadership's management of their studios and the creative output. Again, snake eating its own tail. A vicious cycle that will continue a downward spiral if something doesn't change about the creative output more than like the way the organizations are organized. Or at the very least, that's one man's take, and this is kind of what you need to know about the recent developments surrounding Ubisoft and the way they're restructuring as a last-ditch attempt to save a sinking company. We'll see if all this ultimately does yield better creative output, more for show than anything, and it ultimately doesn't change leadership and the way they handle projects, the way they handle studios and IPs. Share your thoughts on all of this in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.